Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. Now I feel I'm in some kind of a streak and I recorded the video yesterday about FSR 3.1.4 and this is one of the videos that I wanted to record as well about NVIDIA's multi-frame generation or multi-frame generation. You know, that technique that they used in order to make their cards, the RTX 5000 series, seem faster than they actually were.
4090 performance at 549.
But putting that to aside and focusing on the real usability of multi-frame generation, is it really a thing? Because I used it with lossless scaling like three times, 4 times, and it was kind of okay in some scenarios. And since this multi-frame generation is inside the game itself, so instead of being outside of the game at all, like lossless scaling, it is inside the game, meaning automatically that it has lower latency and better quality. Is it really usable? Is it really that bad? Does it really deliver that huge amount of artifacts that we're used to with frame generation at 3 times and 4 times, especially when we're going as low as 30 FPS? The point is, even though they are prone to lower image quality since they are kind of guessing the frames, are they really going to deliver that bad quality that we're used to with multi-frame generation? Now we're starting with Doom the Dark Ages, but before we have sponsor, the Bright Ages. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. Now we're starting with Doom the Dark Ages, basically a first-person shooter, and I'll be testing several cases like Cyberpunk 2077, Black Myth Wukong, which is a third-person game, and I'll be also doing some other scenarios. But firstly we're going to start with Doom the Dark Ages, and we're running 4K with quality DLSS settings with the 5080, and yes, the 5080 is overclocked. Well, I thought that my 5080 couldn't overclock as much, but it seems that it had to do with driver stability maybe. Now that the drivers are better, I tried to overclock further and it seems to be overclocking further. 3.1, it was at 3 GHz, now it can go 3.1, sometimes even higher than that, 315. Now as for the game, it is running maximum settings, the DLSS quality with the transformer model of course, and we're running around 90 FPS. Now, what most people will do in these scenarios is, okay, I want a bit more, I have 90, maybe I have a bit more, I have a very good base FPS number, 90 again, and I want to go further. So what people do is just go and enable the DLSS. They can enable, for example, the DLSS performance. We go up to 112, so the difference is not that big. It's from 90 to 109, 112. Again, not a huge difference, and the quality gets decreased significantly. At least the sharpness, the details get significantly decreased. Going back to the quality mode, and I know that on video you can't really see, but going from performance to quality mode, we do have a big sharpness increase, a big detail increase. So it is just a small percentage that we get, at least in this game. Now what we can do is go and enable the 2 times frame generation. So enabling the 2 times frame generation here, which is kind of the standard frame generation as of now before MFG, and we go from 90, around 90 to 140. This is not an 80 or 90% increase like we see in some scenarios with AMD frame generation, but still it is a pretty good improvement over the previous frame generation that wasn't that great. Now going from 90 to 140, I can tell you right away that the latency has increased a bit, but is still very responsive because we're using NVIDIA's Reflex, and it is so much responsive. Now, as for one of the things that matters the most besides the latency, we're talking about image quality. And with the 2 times mode, looking at some artifacts, to be honest, I'm not able to distinguish any artifacts because we're turning kind of the camera kind of slowly, so I don't think there will be many artifacts. It is working decently well, and as soon as we do it a bit faster, there is nothing noticeable that I can see. So the DLSS frame generation 2 times works very well, especially in story-driven games. This is kind of fast-paced, so it is not as advisable, but I'm just showing you that it can work well. The only thing that you'll notice is the HUD. For example, when you're looking at the letters 91, you can see that there's there's a bit of, well, problems with the image fidelity. Now let's try another thing. We have a very high base frame rate of 90, so the higher the base frame rate, the better the frame generation technology works because it has more data to work with. But let's try a different thing. Instead of going DLSS, we're going DLAA, basically DLSS as anti-aliasing. With DLAA, instead of having 90 FPS, we have around 58, so not even 60 in most case scenarios, but we're running 4K native with the LAA, which is usually better than 4K native with GAA. Let's try the normal frame generation of 2 times, and we're now going from 50 something to 93, which is not that bad. And again, we have that pixel clarity of 4K, but at the same time we're using frame generation that kind of adds that motion blur, that little motion blur that we don't really want. And to be honest, I mean, it looks quite fine. It looks quite fine. We do have a bit more issues in terms of image quality, and I'm telling you that, for example, 90 FPS with the DLSS quality without frame generation feels much better than 90 FPS with frame generation. That's obvious, both in terms of latency and quality, especially when you're moving the camera, but I wouldn't call this bad, considering that it's going from 50 something FPS. The image quality and the image fidelity are really good. Now, since we have a lower base frame rate, you can see that the numbers are kind of shimmering. Not shimmering, but they're kind of trembling. Yeah, you can see that. That's one of the things when having lower base frame rates. But besides that, works great. Now, frame generation is intended to be used mostly when we're talking about monitors like 200 Hz, 160, 200, 240, especially 240, and frame generation like 3 times, I would say 4 times, is mostly aimed at 360 Hz displays. This is of course what the technology is aimed at. Now remember that we're having a base frame rate of 50 something, and from 50 something we go to 134 with frame generation at 3 times. Now the 3 times still feel great. In terms of input latency, the input latency is really low, and remember again, we're going from 50 something to 143, which is actually pretty insane. So even playing like this, so we're doing kind of some fast pacing shooting. And it is perfectly playable. The artifacts are very few, if any, at least the ones that I can notice. And it is actually impressive that the real frame rate that we're getting is around 50 something, meaning that most of the frames that you're seeing here are AI generated, and it still looks great. Now we saw that the 2 times and the 3 times is quite fine in terms of visual artifacts. The 4 times though is a different story. If we enable the 4 times frame generation, we go up to 179, and with 179 you start seeing some artifacts. I would say that it is still quite acceptable, especially in parts where we have more details, and we can see that in some case scenarios the frames aren't as they should quality wise, but it is still very impressive how well this works with a 3 and 4 times mode, especially the 4 times, since we are going from 50 to 190. And no, before you calling me an NVIDIA fanboy and something like that, just go watch my video section, because you'll see of course that you're entirely wrong, and I make mostly videos on the AMD side. But multi-frame generation, at least in Doom the Dark Ages, is working very well, and it's actually impressive what they're able to do with only 50 FPS base. And now we're running Black Myth Wukong, and I want to show you this game for 3 reasons. The first one is that it is a third-person game, meaning that frame generation acts in a different way. The second reason is because we have path tracing, ray tracing, path tracing, and the third reason is because I can show you how frame generation works going from 30 FPS to, let's say, 60, or from 30 to 120 and 30 to 160, 170, because again, frame generation doesn't really work at 100% or double, triple and quadruple, because I want to show you how it works in several scenarios. We're running around 60 something FPS, from 60 to 70 FPS I would say in this specific part, and we're running the DLSS transformer quality, so the DLSS 4 quality mode. And let's try frame generation first of all. Let's just see how it works. Now let's try frame generation. I know this is in Chinese, it's kind of a mistake they made, so 2 times, and we're gonna do it. And we went from 60 something to 122, and this is actually one of the games where the DLSS frame generation works better. I would even say that in most scenarios it works up to 2 times, which is something that it isn't really seen unless you have a CPU bottleneck, and I don't believe this is the case because we're running a 7800X 3D here. But in this case scenario, the 2 times works very well. Going from 60 something to 100 and something makes a big difference. For example, in this scenario we don't really have 2 times. In here we have 114, 100 and something, and it just feels much better. If you are inside your monitor's refresh rate, it just feels much better because you're running at a way higher refresh rate, almost double the refresh rate, and that will increase the smoothness. Because again, frame generation is not a FPS increase technique, it is a smoothing technique, meaning that you still have around the same base frame rate, let's call it that. The latency will also be around the same, but you'll have a way smoother image quality because you're increasing the frames displayed on your monitor, so the refresh rate goes up and you feel that smoothness increase. I mean, you see no artifacts whatsoever, and this is really hard to work with, especially for upscalers, even with AI upscalers, but especially for upscalers and frame generation. This is very hard to work with, and again, basically no noticeable artifacts with frame generation at 2 times. So let's try frame generation at 3 times. Remember, we're having around 60 something base frames. Frame generation 3 times, apply, and we're now running 3 times. Let's see if we have some artifacts with the leaves, and even generating 2 fake frames for each real frame. So the game generates 1 real frame and then the GPU generates 2 fake frames, let's call it that. It is working perfectly fine. As soon as I move the character a bit, I can see that there are some halos around Wukong, or in this case it's not Wukong but our destined one. But it's still perfectly acceptable. As for the latency, it is the same. We're running NVIDIA's Reflex. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable, and I mean we're running 50 something, 60 something base frame rate, and it just works well. And the only visual artifacts that I noticed the most were in Cyberpunk 2077, I believe, but we'll get there, and in Black Myth Wukong it's perfectly fine. With 50, 60 base frame rates, the frame generation just works very good. For example, moving the character here, even on the character, even with all the transparent effects, the tail, we have basically no artifacts whatsoever, nothing that you can really notice in real gameplay. And again, we're going from 60 something FPS to 148. And of course we can go even further, up to 4 times. When you're doing 4 times, you're kind of stretching it. To be honest, you're kind of stretching it. And now with 4 times, for example, as I'm moving the character, I can see that even though we're having 200 FPS, I can see that the image is kind of inconsistent. So even though we're having 200 FPS, it doesn't feel like 200 FPS. We don't really have the picture quality or the picture stability of 200 FPS because the GPU is kind of imagining 3 frames per 1 real frame, meaning that the game rendering is only 1 frame and then the GPU AI is making the other 3. So now let's enable full ray tracing, because one of the biggest selling points of frame generation is to use it with ray tracing, meaning that with ray tracing you have way lower base frame rates, but at the same time you can use frame generation to enhance your smoothing, your gameplay smoothness. So full ray tracing on, ray tracing level very high. And now running ray tracing, the game looks better. I won't say that it doesn't look better, because it definitely looks better. But at the same time, look at the FPS numbers. We're running 29, 30, 29 FPS, which is just so bad. But especially in this part, for example, with all the trees and so on, the game looks definitely much better. Well, now remember, we're getting 30 something FPS. In this case, 36, 37. Now we go here, we enable frame generation 2 times, confirm, and we go from 37, 30 something to 67. Remember, the higher the base frame rate, the better the frame generation will work. And we have a very low base frame rate of 37. And when playing the game, I can definitely feel that the latency is still there because the base frame rate is low. But in terms of smoothness, it is definitely better. Now, I wouldn't say that this feels great, because it's still 60 FPS, 60, 70, and we're going from a very low base frame rate. But even with 30 something base frames, I mean, I can't really find many artifacts here. Especially when moving the camera around, the artifacts aren't really a thing. Let me see if I can if I can force the artifacts per se. Let's try some combos. And let's do some fast movements. And yeah, even in this case scenario, going from 30 something to 60, I would say that yeah, the amount of frames incorrectly generated are really low, and the image quality is quite nice. I mean, it's definitely much better to have the game running like this with frame generation than without it, because we would have around 30 FPS here, which is not really advisable. But yeah, I mean, it's not an enjoyable experience, but it is decent. We do have some artifacts when moving here through the bamboos really quickly, but I mean, at 60 FPS is not really something that you're gonna notice. Now let's try some more juice out of it with a 3x mode, 30 something to 80, which is a huge improvement. And again, let's look at the leaves now that the information that the software has is much lower, so the amount of base frame rates is much lower. And if you look at the leaves now, you can see that there is some ghosting, because again, the base frame rate is very low. 30 something is not enough for the frame generation technique to work, especially since we are generating 2 frames per each real frame, meaning that again, we're gonna have some ghosting. And if you look at the leaves, you can see that there is some ghosting, but still, it is quite acceptable. It could be much worse. I thought it would be much worse, and with such a low base frame rate, it still works decently well. We have some ghosting here and there, but works decently well. The latency is still there for sure, and we do have artifacts for sure, but at the same time, it is just way smoother. But let me just see again, so 80 something. Let's go and disable frame generation and see how it feels. Oh, Jesus Christ. We're having 31 FPS, 20 something sometimes, meaning that the result that we were having before was like with 20 something FPS, and even with only 20 something FPS as base frame rates, the frame generation still did a very good job, from 30 something to 80 FPS, and it was still doing a very, very good job. And see what we get from the 4x. Now the artifacts will be much higher, but I mean, we're going from 30 something FPS, 20 something to 108. And even in this case scenario, when we're looking at the leaves, in most cases we can't really see a super big ghosting. The ghosting is there, of course, but even in some fine details like we're seeing here, the ghosting is very, very low. I mean, it's impressive, very impressive what they can do from 20 something to 80 FPS. Looking, for example, running on a straight line like this, it's impressive what they can do. Look, running like this from 30 FPS, 30 something FPS to 130, 100 something, and just looks great. It just looks great. Of course, we're moving slowly. As soon as we start doing some really big movements, things change. But even doing this, it's impressive. It is not, again, the best experience ever. It is still better if you can have 120 FPS without frame generation. That will definitely deliver you the better experience that you can get, the best experience you can get. But if you have to use frame generation, I would say MFG just does a wonderful job here. Even going 3x, yeah, we still have some inconsistency, and sometimes the frames seem like you aren't using VSync, or you are out of your refresh rate, because again, they aren't consistent sometimes. But going from, let's say, this time we might be having around 50, I would say, 50, 40 something base frame rates to 120, 130, and still performing like this is actually very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. Now, in terms of Cyberpunk 2077, I believe that it only makes sense if we're testing it with path tracing, because we already tested an FPS shooter, a first-person shooter, not a FPS shooter. And now we're running DLSS Super Resolution Performance Mode with a Transformer model, and we're running path tracing. Our base frame rate is around 58, 50 something, meaning that the moment we're using frame generation, our base frame rate will be even lower, or slightly lower, I would say. And 60 feels kind of okay. It's not that great, but it feels nice even when running around with a car. Now let's try the 2x, which is again the standard mode for frame generation, and immediately we go up to 100 FPS, and of course we do have some frame instability here and there, and the only thing that suffers mostly is the HUD. Look, for example, at the one that says 450 meters, and look at the arrows on top of the police heads, and you can see that they're kind of trembling. But besides that, the latency is very good. Let me tell you that the latency is quite good, very good, and it is perfectly playable at 60 FPS, which is just great. If you ask me, just great. Now let's go a bit further and let's push it to 3 times. As soon as you push it to 3 times, you go from 50 something to 150 something. So 150, from 50 something, 60 to 150. And again, we have a bit more artifacts here and there, but nothing really noticeable unless you're looking for them. So if you don't really have a trained eye, this will look much better for you. Oh, my bad. This will look much better for you than the normal 60 FPS, just much better. And we are going now up to 140, 150. And again, it is a pleasant experience. I'm telling you, it is a pleasant experience. Now, what we can do here is that since the performance mode kind of, well, throws away the quality when using path tracing, because path tracing, one of the worst things of path tracing is that it decreases the clarity of the image. And since I have a big monitor, I can definitely see that the clarity when using performance mode isn't that great, especially again when using path tracing. So what we can do is, instead of using performance mode, let's try the quality mode. And as soon as I use the quality mode, especially with path tracing, yeah, the quality just increased a lot, especially the clarity. Instead of upscaling from 1080p to 4K, we're upscaling from 1440p to 4K. So path tracing has a lot more pixels to work with, hence the higher clarity and better quality. But at the same time, we're only getting 30 something FPS, which is not that great. But now let's try the DLSS frame generation 2 times. So we're going to 60, 70 FPS, but with frame generation. But again, we're running quality mode. And let me tell you already, we were running 30 FPS before, and I can immediately, but like immediately tell you that 60 FPS with frame generation feels much better than the 30 something that we had, or 40 without it. It's just a huge difference. Of course that we have some artifacts here and there, and we have ghosting here and there, but still in terms of smoothness, it just feels much better. It is definitely a much better experience. I would say that I kind of prefer this more, because we have better image fidelity, way better clarity, and at the same time we still have these FPS numbers, so yeah. So now let's go even further to the 3 times mode to see what we can get from it, the juice that we can get from it. And we went from, well, 40 something, I would say, 30 something, 40 something. I would say that 30 something, since we're using 3 times mode. Some motion artifacts there. When looking at the cars, I mean, especially when looking at the HUD, if we're looking at the HUD, it is easy to see the halo around the HUD. So easy to see some issues there. I'm also looking at the cars moving, and I can see that around the corners of the cars, the vans, for example, I can see it there on that car. Definitely easy to see, especially when you're looking at the screen instead of just the video. So yeah, we can see the artifacts, but the general experience is quite decent. Now look at the window of the car, and when I say the window, I don't really know the English word, but the window that you use on the left side to look at the rear. Look at it, and we have a huge amount of ghosting when we're passing through the street. You can see it is a decent experience. I wouldn't say great, but decent at least. Better than it was when frame generation was firstly introduced. But still, in this particular scenario of 30 FPS and running a car in Cyberpunk 2077, I wouldn't use it at over 2 times. 2 times is kind of decent, 3 times is kind of pushing it. So yeah guys, overall I'm impressed with multi-frame generation. In some situations it is very usable at 3 times and 4 times. Not all situations. I would say that the maximum you should get is 3 times. 4 times is still not that great, unless again you have a very high base frame rate. If you have a 360Hz display, if you have a 480Hz display, and you have a very high base frame rate of 80, 90, 100, then in that scenario you can simply go to 4 times, and I believe it will work decently well. But as soon as you go to 60 FPS base or something like that, even the 3 times mode will have issues here and there. But usually the 3 times mode really really impressed me, and in most case scenarios it worked very well. Even in Black Myth Wukong, when we were going from 30 something FPS to 100, 110, the difference was just insane, and in terms of smoothness and in terms of playability, it was much better than playing at 30 something base frame rates. It was just insane and really impressed me. In Cyberpunk, I believe that Cyberpunk is actually one of the games that I tested where it works the worst, and even then the 2x and 3x mode can do a very decent job. So yeah, using 2x, 3x mode depending on your monitor, on your setup, is completely fine. If you have at least 60 base frame rate, it will work well. If you have higher than that, it will work even better. So yes, I am impressed with multi-frame generation. It is better than I thought it would be, and if you didn't try it, just try it. And if you already did, leave a comment in the comment section and let me know if you use multi-frame generation or not, because in some scenarios it can definitely be of use. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, hit like, subscribe and share this video, and hope to see you in the next one. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one, because I really hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.